In 1984, as Michael Jackson commanded the stage before 62,000 screaming fans at Dodger Stadium, a drunk band member suddenly broke formation and staggered toward the king of pop, slurring challenges about his ego for everyone to hear. The music stopped, the stadium fell dead silent, and security rushed forward. But what Michael did next defied every expectation and left the entire crowd stunned. But here's what nobody talks about. What could drive a professional musician to risk everything and publicly humiliate the world's biggest star in front of thousands? The summer heat of 1984 hangs thick over Dodger Stadium, as 62,000 voices merge into a deafening roar that seems to shake the very foundations of Los Angeles. Spotlights pierce through the darkness, creating a cathedral of light and shadow as the opening synthesizer notes of Billie Jean echo through the massive arena. This is the Victory Tour. At its peak, Michael Jackson's triumphant return with his brothers. But tonight feels different. There's an electricity in the air that goes beyond the usual pre-show excitement, a tension that crackles like static before a storm. The stadium itself pulses with anticipation, countless heartbeats synchronized in expectation. Fans clutch handmade signs declaring their devotion, their faces painted with glitter that catches the pre-show lighting like scattered stars. Security guards positioned throughout the venue speak in hushed tones into their radios, their trained eyes scanning the audience for any signs of the chaos that inevitably follows Michael Jackson wherever he goes. The air conditioning struggles against the collective body heat of so many people packed into one space, creating an atmosphere that feels both electric and suffocating. Backstage, in the maze of trailers and equipment trucks that forms a temporary city behind the stage, Michael stands perfectly still in his dressing room mirror, adjusting the iconic sequined glove with methodical precision. His rhinestone-studded military jacket catches the harsh fluorescent light, transforming him into the glittering warrior his fans expect to see. But his eyes, those dark, intense eyes, reflect something deeper than performance anxiety. They hold the weight of perfection, the burden of being untouchable in a world that demands nothing less than magic every single night. The distant thunder of the crowd grows louder as showtime approaches, their chants of "Michael, Michael," creating a rhythmic pulse that seems to emanate from the earth itself. Roadies make final adjustments to the elaborate stage setup, testing pyrotechnics that will soon paint the night sky with controlled explosions of color and light. Sound technicians run last-minute checks on equipment worth more than most people's homes, ensuring that every note, every breath, every whispered ad-lib will reach the furthest corners of this concrete coliseum with crystal clarity. In the wings, the other Jackson brothers warm up their voices, but there's an undercurrent of whispered conversations that stops whenever Michael appears. Something has been building for weeks, tensions that simmer beneath the surface of this family business that has consumed their lives. The dynamics that once felt natural now seem forced, professional relationships masquerading as familial bonds under the crushing weight of unprecedented success. Through the chaos of preparation, one figure stumbles slightly against a speaker cabinet. Morrison, the touring keyboardist who's been with the production for 3 months, steadies himself with a hand that shakes just enough to be noticeable. His usually sharp eyes are glazed, unfocused, and when he reaches for his water bottle, the amber liquid inside catches the light in a way that water never would. The other musicians exchange glances. They've seen this progression before, night after night. But tonight feels different. Tonight, Danny's demons seem louder than usual, competing with the roar of the crowd for dominance in the pre-show atmosphere. The stage manager's voice crackles through the intercom system, cutting through the backstage tension like a blade. 5 minutes to places, everyone. 5 minutes. Michael closes his eyes for a moment, centering himself in that space between humanity and legend that he's learned to inhabit. The transformation is visible, shoulders straightening, breathing deepening, the subtle shift from man to myth that millions have paid to witness. As the brothers take their positions in the wings, the crowd's anticipation reaches a fever pitch. Signs wave frantically in the darkness like prayer flags in a hurricane. Cameras flash like lightning strikes. And somewhere in that sea of faces, people hold their breath waiting for magic to happen. The stage lights dim to black, and in that moment of absolute silence before the storm, something shifts in the atmosphere. A premonition that this performance will be unlike any other. That before the night ends, everyone present will witness something that will haunt them forever. Something that will transform a simple concert into legend. The opening explosion of sound hits the stadium like a physical force as Michael glides onto the stage with that otherworldly grace that has defined his legend. His moonwalk across the polished floor sends the audience into hysteria. But beneath the flawless choreography and crystalline vocals, exhaustion weighs on his shoulders like invisible chains. This is show number 47 of a grueling tour that has consumed 5 months of his life, and each performance demands not just perfection, but the kind of transcendence that leaves him emotionally drained and spiritually hollow. Behind the sequined facade, Michael carries the accumulated weight of fame that has grown heavier with each passing year. The tabloid headlines have become more vicious, more invasive speculation about his appearance, his relationships, his very humanity dissected for public consumption. Every move he makes is scrutinized, every gesture analyzed, every private moment somehow transformed into fodder for a media machine that feeds on his mystique. The pressure to maintain the illusion of effortless perfection has begun to crack something fundamental inside him, though he's become masterful at hiding the fractures beneath layers of showmanship. Tonight's performance flows with the mechanical precision of a Swiss watch. Every spin, every vocal run, every dramatic pause, timed to the millisecond. The other Jackson brothers move through their choreography with practiced ease, but there's a distance between them that goes beyond mere staging. Family dynamics that once felt natural now seem forced. Business relationships masquerading as brotherhood. Michael loves them, but the weight of being the star, the draw, the reason tens of thousands paid their hard-earned money, creates an isolation that even family can't penetrate. From his position behind the keyboards, Danny Morrison watches the spectacle unfold with eyes that see too much and understand too little. The alcohol coursing through his system has stripped away the professional veneer that usually keeps his resentments in check. He's been playing music for 15 years, grinding it out in dive bars, wedding receptions, and studio sessions, only to find himself reduced to background accompaniment for someone who seems to float above the very concept of struggle. The injustice of it burns in his chest, fed by liquid courage and years of watching lesser talents achieve greater success through nothing more than genetics and good fortune. As the show progresses, Danny's playing becomes increasingly erratic. His timing slips, his chord changes lag behind the beat, and several times he nearly misses his cues entirely. The other musicians compensate with professional grace, but there's growing concern in their peripheral vision. They've seen talented players self-destruct before, but never on this scale, never in front of an audience this massive. The music continues its relentless forward momentum, but underneath the polished surface, something fragile is beginning to crack. Michael, lost in the transcendent space where performer becomes performance, remains unaware of the brewing crisis just 20 feet behind him. He's giving everything he has to these strangers in the darkness, his voice, his movement, his very soul, transforming their ordinary Thursday night into something approaching religious experience. But as he spins through another flawless sequence, the seeds of an unprecedented confrontation are taking root in the shadows, fed by alcohol, resentment, and the dangerous belief that sometimes the only way to be seen is to destroy something beautiful. The crowd surges forward as Michael launches into Beat It, his voice cutting through the night air with razor-sharp precision. The massive audience moves as one organism, their bodies swaying to rhythms that seem to pulse directly from his soul into theirs. This is the moment when the barrier between performer and audience dissolves completely, when Michael becomes less human and more force of nature. His feet barely seem to touch the ground as he executes a series of spins that defy physics, each movement so fluid it appears choreographed by angels. But behind him, Danny Morrison's world tilts on its axis. The keyboard beneath his fingers feels foreign, the notes blurring together in his alcohol-soaked consciousness. Years of suppressed rage bubble to the surface as he watches Michael command the stage with effortless authority. The injustice of it all, the way success seems to flow to some, while others scramble for scraps, becomes unbearable. His fingers stumble over the keys, producing discordant sounds that clash against the perfection surrounding him. Other band members shoot worried glances in his direction. But the show must go on, even as their foundation begins to crumble. The tipping point comes without warning. As Michael reaches the song's climactic bridge, spinning toward the back of the stage with arms outstretched, Danny's restraint finally snaps. He stands abruptly from his keyboard bench, the sudden movement causing him to stumble slightly. Security guards positioned around the stage, perimeter tense, their trained eyes immediately focusing on the disruption. But before anyone can react, Danny is moving, weaving through the carefully orchestrated chaos of backup dancers and stage equipment with the determined gait of a man who has nothing left to lose. Michael, still lost in the transcendent space of performance, doesn't notice the approaching figure until Danny's voice cuts through the music like a blade. Hey, Michael! The words slur slightly, but their intent is unmistakable. The king of pop turns, confusion flickering across his features as he sees his keyboardist stumbling toward him. Microphone forgotten, professional boundaries shattered. The music falters as other band members realize what's happening, their instruments creating a discordant backdrop to an unprecedented breach of performance protocol. You think you're so special, don't you? Danny's voice carries across the stage, amplified by proximity to the main microphones. The crowd, initially thinking this might be part of the show, begins to murmur with uncertainty. The enormous audience leans forward collectively, sensing that something extraordinary is unfolding before their eyes. We're all up here making you look good, and you don't even see us. We're invisible to you, man. Invisible! The music stops completely now, leaving only the hum of amplifiers and the confused whispers of the spectators. Michael stands frozen in the spotlight, his sequined glove catching the harsh stage lights as his mouth opens slightly in shock. This moment, unscripted, uncontrolled, utterly human, strips away every layer of carefully constructed persona. For the first time in years, Michael Jackson is not performing. He's simply a man standing on a stage, confronted by another man's pain made manifest. Security guards begin moving toward the stage from multiple directions, their black uniforms cutting through the sea of confused faces in the wings. But something in Michael's posture, a subtle hand gesture, barely perceptible to the audience, but clear as daylight to those who know him, signals them to wait. The stadium holds its collective breath as two human beings face each other in a moment of raw, unfiltered truth that will echo through decades of retelling. The silence stretches across Dodger Stadium like a held breath, the enormous crowd suspended in a moment that feels both eternal and impossibly fragile. Michael stands motionless under the harsh spotlight, his glittering military jacket catching and scattering light in 1,000 directions. But his eyes, those dark, penetrating eyes, focus entirely on the man swaying before him. Danny Morrison, all professional pretense stripped away by alcohol and desperation, waits for judgment, for security guards, for the inevitable humiliation that must follow such a public breakdown. But Michael Jackson does something that no one expects, something that will be replayed in memory and retold in whispered conversations for decades to come. Instead of stepping back, instead of signaling security, instead of protecting his image and his show, he steps forward. The movement is deliberate, gentle, almost cautious the way one might approach a wounded animal. His rhinestone glove catches the light as he extends his hand, not in dismissal but in recognition, in acknowledgement of another human being's pain. "What's your name?" The question, spoken into his headset microphone, carries across the stadium with perfect clarity. The spectators strain to hear, confused by this deviation from everything they thought they knew about concerts, about celebrities, about the distance between stars and the people who orbit around them. Danny blinks in surprise, the simple question cutting through his alcohol-fogged rage like sunlight through storm clouds. "Danny," he manages, his voice cracking slightly. "Danny Morrison." Michael nods, as if this information carries weight, as if it matters. "Danny Morrison." He repeats, and somehow the name sounds different when spoken by the king of pop. Not dismissive or patronizing, but dignified, acknowledged. "How long have you been playing with us, Danny?" The question hangs in the air, and the stadium remains frozen in anticipation. 3 months, Danny replies, his anger beginning to transform into something more vulnerable, more human. 3 months of beautiful music, Michael says, his voice carrying that same gentle tone he uses when speaking to children or wounded souls. He takes another step closer, close enough now that the cameras catch the genuine concern in his expression, the way his eyebrows furrow with concentration and empathy. "I hear you every night, man. I hear what you bring to our music." The words land with the force of revelation, and Danny's face crumbles slightly, tears mixing with sweat under the unforgiving stage lights. Michael turns then toward the sea of faces stretching into the darkness beyond the stage lights. When he speaks, his voice carries the weight of experience, of someone who has stood at the pinnacle of human achievement and discovered that the view can be lonely and disorienting. "Sometimes we all struggle," he says simply. "Sometimes we all need to be reminded that we matter, that we're seen, that we're human." The audience listens with an intensity that goes beyond mere entertainment. They're witnessing something sacred, something real. With infinite gentleness, Michael places his hand on Danny's shoulder and begins walking him toward the wing of the stage, not with the urgency of damage control, but with the patience of genuine compassion. The gesture transforms what could have been a humiliating ejection into something approaching dignity. As they reach the edge of the spotlight, Danny turns back, his face streaked with tears, and whispers something that only Michael can hear. The king of pop nods, squeezes his shoulder once more, and watches as security, no longer rushing, but moving with respectful care, helps Danny from the stage. Returning to center stage, Michael stands quiet for a moment, allowing the weight of what just transpired to settle over the stadium like morning mist. When he finally speaks again, his voice carries a different quality, less polished, more human, infinitely more powerful. "The music we make together," he says, "all of us together, is bigger than any one person. Tonight, let's dedicate our music to everyone who's struggling, everyone who needs to know they matter." The spectators erupt not with the manufactured enthusiasm of typical concert applause, but with something deeper: recognition, gratitude, love for a moment of authentic humanity in a world too often starved of genuine connection. Years later, those present will struggle to explain what made that night different, what transformed a potential disaster into something approaching grace. They'll speak of Michael's reaction, of course, but more than that, they'll remember the feeling in the stadium afterward, the sense that they had witnessed not just a performance, but a reminder of what it means to choose compassion over ego, understanding over judgment, humanity over image. The ripples of that single moment of grace continue to spread, carried forward by tens of thousands of witnesses who learned something profound about the man behind the sequined glove, and perhaps something even more important about themselves.